The evening sun cast a warm, golden hue over the vast Swiss Alps, their jagged peaks bathed in a soft glow that reflected off the large windows of the Roth family estate. Hannah Roth, 63 years old, stood by the balcony of her living room, watching the distant mountains as they slowly turned from amber to indigo. It had been a day of mixed emotions. Her son, Liam, had just married Tessa Matthews, a charming, confident woman who had won his heart in the blink of an eye. Hannah had always been proud of her son. Liam had inherited his father's brilliance and her determination, excelling in both his academic and professional pursuits. But ever since his father's sudden passing 3 years ago, Hannah had watched as Liam began pulling away from her. The connection they once shared, the bond formed by years of motherly love and support, had begun to fray at the edges. It was clear that Tessa had woven herself into their lives, and not in a way that made Hannah feel at ease. The wedding reception, held in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Country Club, was a spectacle. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, reflecting the glimmer of the laughter and chatter of the 200 guests gathered below. White roses adorned every table, their soft fragrance mingling with the sound of a string quartet playing in the corner. But as the room buzzed with excitement, a knot began to form in Hannah's stomach. As beautiful as everything was, it felt hollow. The happiness in Liam's eyes didn't seem to reach all the way to her. His gaze was fixed on Tessa, the woman who had now claimed the place beside him, leaving her standing alone at the edge of the celebration. Hannah felt the sting of distance growing wider between them, the inciting incident. As the evening continued, Hannah found herself retreating to the far corner of the ballroom, seeking solace in the shadows of a marble pillar. From here, she could observe without being seen, watching her son as he mingled with his new wife's family. She sipped her drink quietly, her thoughts wandering back to the early days with Liam, the days when he had sought comfort in her arms, before the world became so complicated, before Tessa had arrived. Her quiet reflection was interrupted by a soft voice, one that cut through the noise of the crowd like a knife. It was Tessa, standing by the bar, her champagne flute raised in a toast to her maid of honor who stood beside her, listening intently. "The plan is simple," Tessa whispered, her voice almost conspiratorial like a snake slithering in the grass. "We give it 6 months, maybe a year. Document everything, when she forgets names, when she repeats stories, when she seems confused. Then we have her evaluated." Hannah's heart stilled. She had heard enough to know what was coming next. Her grip tightened around her glass, but she didn't move. She stayed hidden, unable to believe the words she was hearing. Her maid of honor, the woman who was meant to be her ally in all of this, hesitated. "Isn't that a bit harsh?" she asked, raising a brow. Tessa's laugh was sharp, cold. "She's 63 and alone in that big house. It's actually mercy," Tessa continued, a coldness creeping into her words. "Plus, David deserves that beach house after everything she's put him through." The mention of the beach house sent a jolt of ice through Hannah's veins. The beach house, the one she and her late husband, Thomas, had bought 30 years ago. The one where Liam had learned to surf, where they had spent every summer as a family. The one that held so many memories of love, laughter, and warmth. Her legacy. Mercy. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. Mercy wasn't about lying to someone you claimed to love. Mercy wasn't about stripping someone of their dignity to steal their wealth. This was a plan, and it was her son's future on the line. Hannah stood frozen behind the pillar, her heart racing. Tessa's perfect smile, her flawless charm, it all made sense now. This woman wasn't just in love with Liam. She was in love with the wealth, the power, and the life that came with being a Roth. But she wasn't going to get away with it. The realization and turning point. As Tessa caught her eye across the room, she gave a polite wave, still maintaining that perfect smile that had charmed everyone else. Hannah forced a smile back, the strain of the moment making her feel like a woman playing a part she hadn't agreed to. David appeared at her side moments later, adjusting his tie, a tired smile on his face. "Mom, you look pale. Are you feeling okay?" Hannah didn't want him to see the truth that had just stabbed her in the chest. "I'm just tired, sweetheart," she replied, her voice deceptively calm. "It's been a long day." He squeezed her shoulder gently, his face full of concern. "Well, Jessica wants to talk to you about Christmas plans. She has some ideas about traditions." Hannah felt a flare of anger rise in her chest, but she bit her tongue. The idea that Jessica would be making Christmas plans already, after a few months of knowing Liam, after a wedding that had barely been celebrated, felt like a slap in the face. "That sounds lovely," she said, her voice smooth, controlled. "We'll chat later." David, unaware of the storm brewing in his mother's heart, squeezed her shoulder again and headed back to his bride. Hannah watched him go, her heart heavy with the realization that the little boy who once needed her, the boy who cried when he scraped his knee, was now a man who had pushed her to the side. And the woman who had slithered into their lives was the cause of it. Hannah stood there for a moment longer, watching as David disappeared into the crowd. She felt the weight of the years on her shoulders, years spent building a career, a legacy, and a family. She had always believed that family would be the thing that lasted, that love and loyalty would withstand anything. But now, her son was being led down a dangerous path, and the woman who had been part of his life for only a few months was already trying to tear it all apart. The moment had come. She wasn't going to wait for the situation to escalate further. She wasn't going to sit back and watch the woman who had manipulated her son destroy everything she had worked for. Hannah Roth was no fool. She had built her career from the ground up, brick by brick, with strategy, intelligence, and hard work. Now she was about to do the same thing again, only this time she would fight to protect what was hers. And Tessa, well, Tessa was about to learn that this was one game she wasn't going to win. Hannah took a deep breath, finished her drink, and made her way to the bar. She would take back what was rightfully hers, and no one, not even Liam, was going to stand in her way. The weeks following the wedding were quieter than Hannah had anticipated, but the silence wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. Every phone call with Liam was more strained than the last, and her once warm visits to his apartment were now clouded by his increasing distance. Every time she called to check in, it was clear that Tessa was there, in the background, subtly making her presence known. The little gestures, the offhand comments, all of them were aimed at creating a wedge between mother and son. It was like Tessa was building a wall, brick by brick, but Hannah couldn't help but watch as it went up. Her suspicions grew stronger each day. The way Liam no longer invited her over for dinner or made time for their weekly Sunday calls, something they had always shared since his father passed, felt like a betrayal. It was clear that Tessa had a hand in this. Hannah had seen the way her son had changed. He wasn't the young man who used to tell her everything, who trusted her opinions and came to her for advice. Now, he was almost reliant on Tessa's thoughts, letting her dictate everything from their vacation plans to how Liam should spend his money. The moment of realization. One evening, Hannah received a call from Liam. It wasn't the usual Sunday check-in, but an impromptu call that felt odd from the beginning. "Mom." "Hey," Liam said, his voice sounding a little distracted. "Tessa and I were talking, and we think we need to start discussing some family matters." "Family matters?" Hannah asked, confusion creeping into her voice. "What do you mean?" "Well, it's just that. We feel like it might be time for you to start thinking about simplifying things," Liam said, his words slow as if carefully chosen. "You know, the house, your finances. Maybe it's time to stop managing everything on your own." The pit in her stomach deepened. Tessa's influence was undeniable. She had been planting ideas in Liam's head, ideas about how Hannah's management of her estate was outdated, how she needed help with her finances, and how it was time for her to start letting go. Hannah had worked hard for everything she had, and now, in the span of a few months, Tessa had managed to convince Liam that his mother was incapable of managing her own affairs. "I'm perfectly capable of handling my own finances, Liam," Hannah replied firmly, the words coming out sharper than she intended. "Of course you are, Mom," Liam said quickly, his tone defensive. "I didn't mean anything by it, it's just, maybe it's time to talk about the future. You know, we want to make sure you're taken care of in the long run." "Taken care of," Hannah echoed, trying to suppress the growing anger in her voice. "I am taken care of, Liam. I've worked for everything I have. I don't need anyone taking care of me." Liam hesitated before continuing. "Maybe it's time for a financial planner or someone to help with the estate. Tessa knows a good person who could help." "Who?" Hannah asked, her suspicion rising. "Tessa's friend. She's been working with some families in similar situations. She's a financial advisor, but more focused on estate management. Tessa thinks it could help streamline things for you," Liam explained, almost sounding like he was just repeating what Tessa had told him. Hannah stayed silent for a moment. She could feel the manipulation thick in the air, and her instinct screamed that this wasn't just about helping her. This was about taking control of her assets, bit by bit. Tessa was weaving her web, and Liam, blinded by his feelings, didn't even see it. "Don't make any decisions without talking to me first, Liam," Hannah said, her voice now calm but with an edge that conveyed her seriousness. "I'll handle my finances my way." Okay. I just thought it might be a good idea to make things easier," Liam said, sounding a little less sure of himself. "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll be fine." Hannah hung up the phone, but the weight of the conversation lingered. This wasn't just about finances or future planning. This was about control. Tessa was trying to take control of her son's life, and now she was setting her sights on her wealth. Hannah knew this wasn't just a friendly suggestion. This was a power grab, uncovering the web of deceit. The next few days passed in a blur. Hannah had always been independent, but now she realized she had to act quickly. She couldn't let Tessa's plans unfold without a fight. Hannah decided to start investigating. First, she began by reviewing her own finances, checking the accounts, the property records, everything. She was meticulous, as always. She also made a mental note of the items that mattered most: her beach house, her estate, and the family trust. If Tessa was truly planning to manipulate Liam, she needed to make sure that everything was protected. The next step was researching Tessa. It didn't take long for Hannah to uncover something disturbing: Tessa's background in family counseling and mental health assessments. But what stood out was something even more unsettling. She had worked with families where elderly relatives were removed from their homes under dubious pretenses, particularly those who had significant wealth. It was all too coincidental. By the time she had connected the dots, her suspicions were confirmed. Tessa wasn't just interested in Liam, she was interested in the Roth legacy. The confrontation with Liam. One afternoon, after doing her research, Hannah called Liam again. This time, her tone was firm. "Liam, I need to talk to you," she said, not waiting for him to call her first. "Mom, I'm really busy," Liam began, but Hannah cut him off. "This is important. Can you meet me at the estate later? There's something you need to know." Liam agreed, though his reluctance was evident. As soon as he arrived, Hannah led him into the living room. There was no small talk, no pleasantries. Hannah had been preparing for this moment for a while now. She sat Liam down, a cold resolve in her eyes. "I've been doing some research, Liam," she began, "and I know what Tessa has been planning." Liam looked at her startled. "What are you talking about?" Hannah laid out everything she had uncovered: Tessa's background, her manipulative tactics, and the subtle ways she had been working to separate Liam from his family and control the Roth fortune. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't back down. Liam's face drained of color as the truth settled in. Tessa, she wouldn't. She's just been trying to help us. No, Liam, she's been trying to help herself. She wants your money and she's willing to use you to get it, Hannah said, her voice soft but cutting. Liam looked torn, guilt and disbelief playing across his face. I didn't know, Mom. I didn't see it. I thought I was just trying to move on to build something with her. But now I don't know what to think. Hannah placed a hand on his arm. You need to see her for who she really is. She's been manipulating you, Liam. Don't let her destroy everything we've worked for. For the first time in months, Liam met his mother's eyes. The walls between them began to crumble. It wasn't going to be easy, but he was starting to see the truth. Conclusion of Part 2. As the tension between mother and son began to settle, Hannah knew that the next step would be critical. She had to protect her assets, her legacy, and most importantly, her relationship with Liam. But there was no denying it anymore. The battle for her future had begun. And Tessa was going to learn that Hannah Roth wasn't as vulnerable as she thought. The following weeks felt like a slow-burning fuse. Every day, tension crackled in the air, but Hannah remained calm, collected. She had exposed Tessa's manipulation to Liam, and though he was still processing the shock, he hadn't yet fully accepted the extent of what had been happening. Tessa, however, hadn't taken a step back. In fact, the moment Liam's attention wavered, she pushed harder. Hannah knew she had to act quickly. The Roth family estate had always been Hannah's pride and joy, the symbol of everything she had worked for over the years. It was a beautiful mansion nestled in the Swiss Alps, surrounded by lush forests and crystal-clear lakes. This was where she and Thomas had built their life together, where they had raised Liam, and where countless memories had been made. And yet, in the blink of an eye, she was about to lose it all, unless she took action. The call to action. Late one night, as the stars began to fill the sky, Hannah sat at her desk, reviewing the documents she'd gathered over the past few weeks. The beach house, her late husband's legacy, where they'd spent so many summers, was worth millions, and the estate itself was now an asset that Tessa was coveting. For Liam, it was more than just property. It was their family's history, and yet Tessa had already planted the idea that it was better off in Liam's hands alone, without Hannah's influence. Hannah had been patient long enough. She picked up the phone and dialed her lawyer, Thomas Hartwell. He'd been the family attorney for years, handling everything from the trusts to legal agreements, and he knew Hannah's mind better than most. "Thomas, it's time," Hannah said, her voice steady. Thomas was silent for a beat before responding. "Are you sure, Hannah? This is going to be difficult. You know how Liam will react." "I don't have a choice anymore," she replied. "Tessa is pushing him further away from me. She's manipulating him and he doesn't see it. If I don't do something now, I'll lose everything. Not just the properties, but my son. I'll lose him too." "All right," Thomas said. "I'll start the paperwork tomorrow. We'll move fast." As Hannah hung up the phone, she stared at the pictures of the beach house on her desk, memories of summers spent with Thomas and Liam. Her heart ached for the family she used to have, but she wasn't about to let Tessa tear it apart. The trust and the scheme. The next morning, Hannah called David, her son's childhood friend. David had always been a dependable ally. A former lawyer turned private investigator, he was someone she could trust. She needed information, and fast. "David, I need you to look into something for me. It's about Tessa. I have reason to believe that she's been manipulating Liam for months. I need you to dig into her past, anything you can find," Hannah said, her tone sharp and determined. David hesitated before responding. "You think she's behind this. You're not wrong to suspect it. I've noticed some strange things too, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I'll get started right away." The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and legal consultations. Hannah made sure to secure her assets, transferring the estate and beach house into a trust with an independent trustee, someone who had no ties to Liam or Tessa. She did everything by the book, making it as airtight as possible. If Tessa was going to play dirty, Hannah was ready to do the same, but with strategy and precision. The confrontation with Liam. A week later, Hannah sat in her living room watching the fireplace flicker. She could hear the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Liam was coming. She had asked him to meet her here, no distractions, no Tessa. He needed to hear her side, and this time she wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. When the doorbell rang, Hannah rose from her seat and walked to the door, opening it to reveal Liam, standing there with a mixture of confusion and apprehension on his face. "Mom," Liam said, his voice tight, "what's going on? Why did you want to meet like this?" "Come inside, Liam. I have something to show you." Liam stepped inside, glancing nervously at his mother. "What's this about?" Hannah led him to the living room and gestured for him to sit. She had a folder in front of her, the contents ready to be revealed. "Liam, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About me being controlling, about my finances. I know you're just trying to do what's best for both of us, but I need you to understand something." Liam sat down, his expression guarded. "What's that?" "Tessa is not who you think she is. She's been manipulating you, Liam. I've done some digging on her background, on her past, and it's not pretty." Hannah opened the folder, pulling out documents she had compiled. "I have proof, Liam. Proof that she has done this before with other families, manipulating wealthy men, isolating them from their families, and then taking control of everything they have." Liam's face flushed with a mix of shock and disbelief. "What are you talking about, Mom? Tessa would never do that." Hannah slid a few documents across the table, including police reports, court records, and a letter from a former client who had been swindled by Tessa. "I know it's hard to believe. You're in love with her, Liam, but you need to see the truth. Tessa is after your inheritance. She's after our estate, our beach house. She wants it all." Liam stared at the papers, his hands shaking as he picked them up. His eyes scanned the pages, and the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. "No," he whispered. "This can't be true." "It is," Hannah said softly. "She's been planting seeds of doubt in your mind, pushing you away from me. You've become so focused on her, you haven't even noticed that she's been running the show." Liam sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the flood of information. His mind raced, his loyalty torn between the woman he loved and the mother who had always been there for him. "Mom, I didn't know. I thought I was just doing what was best, but now..." Liam's voice faltered. He swallowed hard. "I can't believe I let her do this." Hannah reached out and placed a hand on his. "Liam, I know you never meant to hurt me, but you have to realize something. I'm not just trying to protect myself. I'm trying to protect you too. Tessa is using you, and I won't let her tear us apart." Hannah's last move. The next morning, as Liam sat quietly in his room, contemplating everything his mother had told him, Hannah made her final move. She had already begun the process of selling the properties, including the beach house. She had decided that it was better to liquidate her assets now than to let Tessa get her hands on them. She reached out to her lawyer, Thomas Hartwell, one last time. The sale of the estate and beach house would be discreet, and the proceeds would be placed in a separate account for Liam when he was ready, after he had earned it, after he had learned to stand on his own, without the influence of Tessa. Hannah watched the sale papers go through, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. She had lost the beach house, but she had not lost herself. She had outsmarted the people who had underestimated her. As the paperwork was finalized, David, the private investigator, called her with some disturbing news. Tessa's connections ran deeper than expected. There were even whispers of people on the inside trying to sway Liam to side with Tessa, but that would be a battle for another day. For now, Hannah Roth was in control. Conclusion of Part 3. Hannah had taken back what was hers, and more importantly, she had started to win back her son. She knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on solid ground. She had fought for her legacy, for her future, and for Liam's. The coming days would show whether Liam could truly free himself from Tessa's grasp. But no matter what happened, Hannah Roth was ready. The days following the sale of both the estate and the beach house passed in a blur. Hannah Roth felt a sense of liberation, of clarity, as she made her way through the motions of finalizing the transactions. But the storm wasn't over yet. Tessa hadn't backed down. In fact, she had only grown bolder. The messages from Liam were infrequent, and his visits became more and more distant. Tessa's influence had grown stronger. It wasn't just the properties anymore, it was everything. Liam had become her puppet, and Tessa's strings were stretched taut. But Hannah knew that the time had come to expose the entire web of deceit, a bitter visit. One afternoon, a knock on the door pulled Hannah from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting company, least of all, Liam and Tessa. Hannah had just finished some paperwork and was standing in the kitchen when she heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up. Her pulse quickened. The doorbell rang. Hannah opened it slowly, and there they were, Liam in his usual relaxed, casual manner, but Tessa standing behind him, her smile sharp, her posture rigid as though she had already won. The perfect picture of a couple who believed they had everything under control. "Mom," Liam greeted, his voice strained. "We need to talk." "About what?" Hannah asked, her tone controlled, her heart pounding. She knew what was coming. Tessa stepped forward, her gaze cold but polite. "I think it's time we address some things, don't you, Hannah?" "Come in," Hannah said, stepping aside. She could feel the tension thick in the air. Tessa was about to make her move, but this time Hannah wasn't going to let it happen. She was prepared. The moment they were inside, Liam sat down and Tessa stood beside him. Hannah motioned to the couch across from them. Liam sighed and leaned forward. "Mom, I've been thinking, and I don't know how to say this, but we need to talk about the house sales. You're making decisions without talking to me, and now it's getting to be too much." "Too much?" Hannah's eyebrows furrowed. "You think it's too much to protect my legacy, to secure my future, to make sure my son doesn't get manipulated by his wife?" Liam flinched, his face pale. "I'm not being manipulated, Mom, but you sold the beach house, you sold everything, and you didn't even tell me. You're treating me like I'm a child." Tessa stepped forward, her voice soft but poisonous. "Hannah, we understand that you're upset, but David and I are trying to build a future together. We were just trying to make things work, make things easier for both of us. You know, you don't need all this land and these properties anymore. You don't need all this responsibility." "Don't need it," Hannah repeated, her anger rising. "You don't think I worked hard for everything I have. You don't think my late husband, Thomas, and I worked our entire lives to build this legacy. You think I don't need it." "Please, Mom," Liam said, rubbing his face. "We just want what's best for you." Hannah clenched her fists. "You want what's best for me, or is it what's best for you? Because I'm starting to think this isn't about me at all. This is about you and Tessa getting control of what's mine." Tessa's smile tightened. "You're misunderstanding, Hannah. We just want to help you. We're trying to make sure you don't make any impulsive decisions. You're getting older, and we just want you to be comfortable. I'm trying to look out for you, even if you don't see it that way." Hannah's blood ran cold. This wasn't about caring for her. This was about taking control of her assets. Tessa had planned this all along, to manipulate Liam into thinking Hannah was a burden, someone who needed help, and Tessa would be the one to offer it. The twist. Hannah knew it was time to confront Tessa directly. It was time to expose the truth. "Let's talk about what you really want, Tessa," Hannah said, her voice sharp as a blade. Liam looked up, startled by the shift in his mother's tone. "I've done some digging, you see. I've been gathering some information about you, your past, your professional history." Tessa's face remained impassive, but Hannah saw the subtle flicker of unease in her eyes. "I know exactly who you are," Hannah continued, pulling out a folder from the desk drawer. She slid it across the table to Liam. "I know about your history with elder fraud, the people you've manipulated, the lives you've destroyed for profit. I know how you've used your role in social services and family counseling to exploit vulnerable families." Liam's face turned pale as he looked down at the documents in front of him. Tessa remained silent, her perfect smile faltering for the briefest of seconds. "These are just accusations," Tessa said, her voice rising, trying to sound composed. "These are lies. None of this is true." Hannah shook her head. "You're a master manipulator, Tessa, but I'm not your mark. Not anymore. I've had you investigated. You've done this before. I've spoken to people who know what you've done to other families, and now you're trying to do it to mine." Liam was visibly shaken, the realization settling in. You really did all this, Tessa?" he asked, his voice small. His trust in her was crumbling. Tessa's face contorted, the mask of the perfect girlfriend slipping entirely. "I was just trying to help, Liam. I was just trying to make things easier for you, for both of us." "You were trying to make things easier for you," Hannah said coldly. "You saw a vulnerable man and you exploited him, and now you're trying to do the same to me." The final blow, Tessa stood up, her fury boiling over. "This is ridiculous," she spat, turning to Liam. "You're going to believe this, after everything we've been through together." Liam stood too, his voice quieter now, but filled with regret. I need some time, Tessa. I need to think about everything. I can't keep doing this." Hannah watched, her heart heavy, as Liam walked away from Tessa for the first time. Tessa didn't try to stop him. Instead, she stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of destruction behind her. Liam stood there, silent. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now how wrong I was." Hannah placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were just trying to protect what you thought was yours, but you've learned now, Liam. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human, and you still have time to make things right." Liam nodded, his face conflicted but understanding. Conclusion of Part 4. As the door closed behind Tessa, Hannah stood tall. The battle had just begun, but she had won this round. Liam's eyes were open now, and the hold Tessa had over him was crumbling. The next steps would be about rebuilding trust, not just between them, but also with the rest of the family. But for now, Hannah allowed herself a moment of triumph. She had exposed the truth, and in doing so, she had not only protected her legacy, but her relationship with her son. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Hannah Roth was far from done. The days that followed Tessa's explosive exit from Hannah Roth's home were tense. Liam had gone quiet, withdrawing into himself as he processed the shock of his own blindness. It was painful to watch, seeing the man he had become, realizing how far he'd been manipulated, how far he had strayed from the woman who had always been there for him. The distance between them wasn't just emotional anymore. It was palpable, thick in the air like a suffocating fog. Hannah Roth, however, wasn't the type to linger in the shadows of regret. She had already acted decisively, securing her legacy and protecting her assets. But protecting Liam was something she wasn't ready to give up on. The road to reconciliation was going to be long, but she wasn't going to stop trying. The cold reality. The reality of the situation hit Hannah hard one afternoon when she received an unexpected phone call from Liam. His voice was ragged, tired, and distant. "Mom," Liam said, barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." For a brief moment, the weight of the situation seemed too heavy to carry. But Hannah, ever the resilient woman, pushed the exhaustion aside. "Where are you, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice soft. "Can I come over?" His voice broke at the end of the sentence. Hannah knew what was coming. This wasn't just about reconciliation. This was about something much bigger. Liam was finally ready to face the consequences of his choices. "Of course, Liam. Come by when you're ready." The confrontation. An hour later, there was a quiet knock at the door. Liam stood there, his hands stuffed into his pockets, his posture tense. He looked like a man who had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders and had nowhere to place it. Hannah opened the door slowly and smiled, despite the emotional storm raging inside her. "Come in." Liam stepped inside, glancing around the house he had once considered a home. Tessa's absence made the space feel empty, yet strangely more his own than ever before. He stood in the living room, uncertain, before finally sitting down on the couch. "I messed up, Mom," he began, his voice shaky. "I really messed up." "I know, sweetheart," Hannah said, sitting beside him. "But you're here now, and that's what matters." Liam ran a hand through his hair, his eyes avoiding hers. "I was so blinded by her, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what she was doing to us, to you." Hannah felt a pang in her chest, but she held back the tears. It was progress, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "You're not the first to be deceived, Liam, but you are the only one who can make things right. You need to choose which side you're on, and I can't do that for you. You have to make that choice yourself." Liam looked at his mother, pain and regret written all over his face. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right." "Start by being honest," Hannah said, her voice firm. "Be honest with yourself, with me, and with everyone who's been hurt. Then we can talk about moving forward, but it won't be easy." Liam nodded, but there was a hesitation in his eyes. Tessa had done a number on him, planting seeds of doubt that had taken root deep in his heart. He had allowed her manipulations to cloud his judgment for so long, and now, even with the truth in front of him, it wasn't simple to untangle the mess. The revelation. As the days passed, Hannah began to make moves to seal her victory once and for all. She knew Tessa wouldn't go down without a fight, but Hannah wasn't willing to let her walk away unscathed. The information Hannah had gathered on Tessa's criminal past was a weapon she wasn't ready to discard. One cold afternoon, while Liam was still figuring out how to repair the wreckage of his relationship with his mother, Hannah received a phone call from Detective Morrison. "I've got the evidence you requested," the detective said. "Tessa has been under investigation for elder fraud for years. We have the files, but there's something else you need to know. She's also involved in other cases, people she's manipulated to gain control of their assets. She's not just a fraudster, she's dangerous." "How dangerous?" Hannah asked, the weight of the words sinking in. "She's already been linked to several cases across multiple states. She uses the same tactics every time. Get close to a vulnerable man, isolate him from his family, and then take control of everything they own. But in your case, she made one fatal mistake." Hannah felt a surge of both fear and adrenaline. "What mistake?" "She underestimated you," Detective Morrison replied. "You've already made the right moves, Hannah. The beach house, the estate, all of it's been protected. But now it's time to deal with Tessa once and for all." The final blow. A week later, the final confrontation took place. Tessa was served with legal papers and, as expected, didn't take it well. Liam was by her side, still wavering, still unsure of everything. But this time he wasn't blind. The truth had been laid out before him, and he saw it clearly now. The press conference Tessa had been planning to announce her new wellness program became a trap she never saw coming. Hannah Roth, along with her lawyer Thomas Hartwell and Detective Morrison, stood in front of a gathering of reporters, ready to reveal the truth to the world. "Thank you for joining us today," Hannah began, her voice calm and steady. "I have something very important to share about Tessa Matthews, a woman who has manipulated not only my family, but many others to get control of their wealth and assets. For the last few years, she's been preying on vulnerable men, creating false narratives about their mental health, and isolating them from their families." The reporters gasped as Detective Morrison stepped forward with the evidence, laying out Tessa's criminal history, her involvement in elder fraud, and the manipulative tactics she had used to gain control over Liam's inheritance. Tessa, standing at the back of the room, froze. The perfect smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure panic. Her face was pale, her shoulders slumped as she realized the truth was out. She had lost. The fallout. Liam stood off to the side, torn between his mother and the woman he thought he loved. But it was clear now that his loyalty had to lie with the one who had always been there for him. Tessa had taken advantage of him, and though he didn't want to admit it, he couldn't deny it anymore. As Tessa was arrested, the realization of what had been done hit Liam hard. He walked over to his mother, standing beside her as the press took photos and the police led Tessa away in handcuffs. "Mom," Liam said quietly, looking at her with deep regret, "I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't see what she was doing." Hannah placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and forgiving. "I know, sweetheart, I know. But it's not about what's lost now, it's about what we rebuild." Resolution. In the days that followed, Tessa Matthews was exposed for what she truly was, a manipulative fraudster. Her name was cleared from the Roth legacy, and she was sentenced to federal prison for her crimes. Liam, though heartbroken by the loss of someone he loved, began the slow process of rebuilding his relationship with his mother. Hannah's decision to take control of her future, to act decisively and protect her family, had saved them both. But it wasn't just about assets or revenge. It was about love, the love a mother has for her son, and the strength she must show to protect him when the world tries to tear them apart. Hannah Roth stood strong in the face of adversity. She had faced betrayal, manipulation, and loss, but she emerged stronger, more determined than ever. Her legacy was intact, her son was back in her life, and the road ahead, though uncertain, was filled with the promise of healing. The battle had been hard fought, but for Hannah, there was no greater victory than saving her family.